Speech of President Corazon Aquino during the joint session of the U.S. Congress. Cory Aquino's speech talks about her family background, especially her relationship with her late husband, Ninoy Aquino's toil and suffering at the hands of the dictatorship that he resisted, her democracy views, the Philippine debt insurgency, and her compliments to America. Delivered at Washington, D.C. on September 18, 1986, author, President Corazon C. Aquino, original language, English.
Brief life of the author. Maria Corazon Cory Aquino is the first woman president in the Philippines from 1986 to 1992, after the long dictatorship of the 10th President Ferdinand Marcos. Her famous contribution, which is the EDSA People Power, put our nation in the international spotlight for overthrowing a dictator through peaceful means. She was the wife of former Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., who is one of the Marcos oppositionaries. Cory came from a rich haciendero family in Tarlac and owned a vast estates of sugar plantation and occupied local and national government positions. She was born on January 25, 1933 in Paniki, Tarlac, and died on August 1, 2009.
This is the summary of the speech of Corazon Aquino during the joint session of the U.S. Congress. The Ninoy Stories. 3 years ago, I left America in grief to bury my husband, Ninoy Aquino. I thought I had left it also to lay to rest his restless dream of Philippine freedom. Today, I have returned as the president of a free people. In burying Ninoy, a whole nation honored him. By that brave and selfless act of giving honor, a nation in shame recovered its own. The dictator already knew that Ninoy was not a body merely to be imprisoned, but a spirit he must break. For even as the dictatorship demolished, one by one, the institution of democracy, the press, the Congress, the independence of the judiciary, the protection of the Bill of Rights, Ninoy kept their spirit alive in himself. He stopped only when it dawned on him that the government would keep his body alive after the fast had destroyed his brain. And so, with barely any life in his body, he called off the fast on the 40th day. God meant him for other things, he felt. He did not know that an early death would still be his fate, that only the timing was wrong. The passage emphasizes the bravery, selfless act, pleasing sacrifice and freedom of Ninoy against the dictator. The cruel and terror leadership during Marcos' regime was clearly stated. The dictatorship of Marcos demolished the democracy of the nation that leads to indignities and terrorism. Further, it depicts the struggle of Filipino revolutionaries who fight for freedom and democracy during Marcos' era. Ninoy's strong determination of national independence for peace and freedom to see a crystal clear democratic country.
Cory's democracy views. Archibald MacLeish had said that democracy must be defended by arms when it is attacked by arms, and by truth when it is attacked by lies. He failed to say how it shall be won. I held fast to Ninoy's conviction that it must be by the ways of democracy. I held out for participation in the 1984 election, the dictatorship code, even if I knew it would be reached. I was warned by the lawyers of the opposition that I ran the grave risk of legitimizing the foregone results of elections that were clearly going to be fraudulent. But I was not fighting for lawyers, but for the people in whose intelligence I had implicit faith. By the exercise of democracy, even in a dictatorship, they would be prepared for democracy when it came. And then, also, it was the only way I knew by which we could measure our power even in the terms dictated by the dictatorship. The people vindicated me in an election, shamefully marked by the government thuggery and fraud. the opposition swept the elections, garnering a clear majority of the votes, even if they ended up, thanks to a corrupt commission on elections, with barely a third of seats in parliament. Now I knew our power. In this passage, Cory discussed her extraordinary triumph through individuals' battle and kept discussing her most punctual drives as the leader of a re-established majority rule system. She expressed that she expected to manufacture and draw up compromise after a weak and polarizing autocracy. Cory accentuated the significance of the EDSA revolution as far as being a restricted upset, the regarded of life and opportunity of each Filipino.
The story of People Power Revolution. Last year, in an excess of arrogance, the dictatorship called for its doom in a snap election. You saw a people so committed to the ways of democracy that they were prepared to give their lives for its failed imitation. At the end of the day, before another wave of fraud could distort the results, I announced the people's victory. Surely, the people take care of their own. It is on the faith and the obligation it entails that I assume the presidency. Now, we are restoring full constitutional government. The statement recalls the year of the snap election where people get involved and obliged Cory to challenge the dictatorship. Cory discussed the happenings during the election, the country's commitment of every Filipino to fight for democracy, the extraordinary manifestation of democracy that resulted to a victorious one, the limited revolution of Filipinos who seek freedom and independence, the restoration of Philippine democracy in varied ways to uphold independent and constitutional government.
Philippine Debt Summary. Finally, may I turn to that other slavery, our $26 billion foreign debt. I have said that we shall honor it. Yet, must the means by which we shall be able to do so be kept from us. Many conditions imposed in the previous government that stole the debt continue to be imposed on us who never benefited from it. With a little help from others, we Filipinos fulfill the first and most difficult conditions of the debt, negotiation, the full restoration of democracy, and responsible government. Elsewhere, in other times of more stringent world economic conditions, Marshall plans and their like were felt to be necessary companions of returning democracy. When I met President Reagan yesterday, we began an important dialogue about cooperation and the strengthening of the friendship between our two countries. That meeting was both a confirmation and a new beginning and should lead to positive results in all areas of common concern. Wherever I went in the campaign, slum area or impoverished village, they came to me with one cry: democracy, not food, although they clearly needed it, but democracy, not work, although they surely wanted it, but democracy, not money, for they gave what little they had to my campaign. They didn't expect me to work a miracle that would instantly put food into their mouths, clothes on their back, education in their children, and work that will put dignity in their lives. In this paragraph, Cory then turned to the controversial topic of the Philippine foreign debt amounting $26 billion. This debt had been ballooned during the Marcos regime. Cory expressed her intention to honor those debts despite mentioning that the people did not benefit from such debts. Thus, she mentioned her protestations about the way the Philippines was deprived of choices to pay those debts within the capacity of the Filipino people. She proceeded with that while the nation had encountered the disasters brought by a bad dictatorship of Marcos, no comparable help was at this point to be stretched out to the Philippines. She even commented that the given quite EDSA People Power Revolution, our must have been the cheapest revolution ever. She exhibited that Filipino individuals satisfy the most troublesome state of the obligation arrangement, which was the restoration of democracy and responsible government.
The insurgency. We face a communist insurgency that feeds on the economic deterioration, even as we carry a great share of the free world defenses in the Pacific. These are only two of the many burdens my people carry, even as they try to build a worthy and enduring house for their new democracy that may serve as well as a redoubt for freedom in Asia. Yet no sooner is one stone laid that two are taken away. Half our export earning 2 billion pesos of out 4 billion pesos, which was all we could earn in the restricted markets of the world. When to pay just the interest on the debt whose benefit the Filipino people never received. Still, we fought for honor, and if we only for honor, we shall pay. And yet, should we have to wring the payments from the sweat of our men's faces and sink all the wealth built up by the bandsmen who had 150 years of unrequited toil? In this paragraph, the dust had hardly begun to settle when former President Corazon Aquino spoke before a joint session of the United States Congress in September 1986. It was her first trip to America since dictator Ferdinand Marcos was toppled in February of that year, and the Philippines was still dealing with the consequences of his rule. This included a total foreign debt of 26 billion US dollar and a communist insurgency that rose from 500 armed guerrillas to 16,000 under Marcos' presidency. We were only at the beginning of a lengthy journey back to health.
Compliments to America. 3 years ago, I said thank you, America, for the haven from oppression, and the home you gave Ninoy, myself, and our children, for the 3 happiest years of our lives together. Today, I say join us, America, as we build a new home for democracy, another haven for the oppressed, so it may stand as a shining testament of our two nations' commitment to freedom. Cory ended her speech by expressing her gratitude to America and its people for the unending support in building nations' commitment for freedom. Cory acknowledged America's treasure in building freedom for two nations' democracy.
Conclusion. Previous President Cory Aquino's speech was a significant occasion in the political and discretionary history of the country since it was seemingly solidified the authenticity of the EDSA government in the worldwide field. Perusing Aquino's discourse, we can truly take signals simply on Cory's singular thoughts and desires, yet additionally core values and structure of the public authority that she addressed.